Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Good evening, friends, and welcome to this Wednesday night, August 12, 2015 edition of Nightcast. Tonight's opening story, friends, involves, we'll go to China for it. Massive explosions have hit China's northern city. At least 300 people, 7 deaths.
Taken from a high-rise apartment block, this piece of mobile phone video illustrates well the scale of the disaster. There's already been one explosion, and then this. At a distance of more than a mile, it takes a full 8 seconds for the force of the blast to arrive. Eyewitnesses have been speaking of the effect on the buildings that were even closer.
I was sleeping and got woken up by a massive explosion. I could just feel my whole building shake. I thought it was an earthquake. So I just kind of woke up in a panic, looked out the window, and the sky was red. My friend who took the video, she only had one apartment in between her and a clear view of the port. So you can see the port from her apartment. And her whole veranda, all of her sliding doors got blown in. And if she was sitting on the couch watching TV at that time, she probably would have got hit by them.
There are reports of hospitals being overwhelmed with casualties, while the official estimate of the numbers of dead and injured is changing rapidly. Tianjin is a major port city just 70 miles from Beijing and home to more than 10 million people. State media is reporting that the site of the explosion, or what's left of it underneath the towering black cloud of smoke, was a special warehouse for storing dangerous materials. There's no further detail yet on exactly what was being stored here.
Okay, friends, and that was John Sudworth with that report from Beijing. And we're doing something a little bit different tonight, friends. If you look underneath the video area up on the upper left side, we will be putting the different colored horses that are depicted from the book of Revelation 6 to show you what that particular news story relates to. Now, we use the pale horse on that last one because if we go to our charts here, let me pull it in close. You'll see the first 4 seals which are active from the book of Revelation 6. Book of Revelation and chapter 6. Those first 4 seals are active now. And that fourth one actually has a couple of things related to it. Jesus Christ described it primarily in plain language in the Greek term loimus, meaning disease epidemics, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt. But he also said that between the 3rd seal and the 5th seal, there would be seismic activity, commotions in the air, such as gale force winds of all kinds, and commotions on the ground, such as earthquakes and volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, wildfires, floods, etc. And he said there would be terike. Now, that's only recorded in Mark 13, verse 8. Terike meaning roiling waters, trouble, mob, sedition, and the kind of trouble that, like roiling waters, just gets worse and worse as we go and leads up to the mega trouble of the 5th seal, but is not part of the 5th seal. It'll roll into it, but when the 5th seal hits, there's going to be a dramatic change in trouble because that'll be the time of that great tribulation, as Jesus Christ described it, as a time of trouble so bad that nothing since the beginning of the world has ever been as bad as what's coming, and we haven't seen that yet. There's been worse times during round 2 of World War and even round 1 of World War. And round 3 promises much more. Great trouble, great tribulation, mega trouble, tribulation, and yet we will see trouble. So I attach those extra things that Christ said that would happen between the third and the fifth seal. I just peg them onto the bottom of the fourth seal and relate them in that way. Those are part of the things that Jesus Christ told us to be watching in Luke 21 and verse 32. And friends, if I turn over to that verse in a Bible that I used during college days, I had several I used. I had one, a loose leaf note Bible that you were able to move the pages around in the loose leaf Bible that was sold in our college bookstore on the Ambassador College campus in Pasadena. And I took the chapters, I took the books apart, took them out and arranged them in the inspired order. Now, somebody's printed a Bible in that order. Several people have, actually. Several publishers have. But I found a loose leaf, but before they began to be published in that way, I found a loose leaf version, and we were taught what was the inspired order. And I said, well, I'm going to put my Bible in the inspired order, and so I did, and I learned how to fumble through that. But, you know, since the Bible's printed here a little, there a little, there is a value in, if you're going to read the Bible from Genesis to the end and read that way, there's a value in reading it in the inspired order. And maybe on the weekends I'll go into the details we were given on why there's some value to that was mentioned to us in college, during college days. But most people with electronic Bibles, where the books are, doesn't make a hill of beans difference with an electronic Bible. And for some of our purposes, looking up things that we're relating that are here a little, there a little, you know, the order of the King James Bible, it works for us. It's not ideal, mind you, but it works for us. But Luke 21:36, I wrote in my margin some of the things Mr. Armstrong told us that were part of what Christ said do in verse 36 of Luke 21, where Christ said, watch you therefore. This is therefore after he's explained many of the seals from Revelation 6, he's explained them in plain language here in Luke 21. And then in verse 36, he says, watch you therefore, and pray always. He's saying, watch these things. And he's already told us in an earlier verse that he made a comparison to when you see the branches of a tree become tender and the little buds on them begin to blossom. We know that summer is nigh. And he said, likewise, compared to that, when you see these first four seals become extremely active, these first four that Revelation depicts by four different colored horses, a white horse for religious deception, a red horse for war and rumors of war, world war, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom. The third seal depicted by a black horse, scarcity of food. Jesus Christ said it in a word. Limus, meaning famine. And the fourth seal depicted by a pale horse with a rider whose name is Death, alongside whom rides Hades, hell, the grave. So a horse involving much death and trouble. And Jesus Christ explaining it primarily by the Greek term loimos, meaning disease epidemics, pestilences, the plagues of Egypt, and by a couple of other Greek terms, seismos, seismic conditions, commotions in the air, commotions on the ground, as I mentioned a moment ago, and the third term, terake, trouble. And so that's what we had in that story tonight. And so we put the pale horse up there to signal you that it's trouble. It's either trouble or a seismic activity or some disease epidemic if we've got the pale horse up there. All right, now our next story is going to relate to the second seal from the book of Revelation, depicted by a red horse, and you can see up in the picture area on the screen behind me, up in the upper left-hand corner on your side of the screen of the picture area, I put the little red horse already to tell you the next story is going to relate to war and rumors of war, and this one is rather a heavy one. I was going to read to you the margins, though, real quickly from verse 36 in my Bible, where Mr. Armstrong said, watch you therefore. He said, watch weather patterns, watch pictures of public health, watch international geopolitical maneuverings. He said, watch military struggles and watch alliances and power grabs. There was just a few of the things that he mentioned and there's other things in my column. Yeah, big trends in major power blocks, drought, famine, pestilence, tortures, and death. There we go. One on tortures and death. And there's more, but that's all I'm going to mention to you tonight, just to let you know that there are some details that relate to what to watch, that relate to these 4 seals that are in kind of plain language version of what Christ summarized sometimes in a few words for us, just giving us the overall picture. This next story relates again to that Red Seal war, rumors of war, and torture and death. We could put the green horse up there too, because there's death in this one. A photograph posted online appears to show that a Croatian hostage has been beheaded by Islamic State militants in Egypt. Tomislav Salopek, a father of 2, was kidnapped outside Cairo last month. You'll hear that in this video. The Croatian government says it hasn't been able to verify his death, but it fears the worst. It's the first time that an Egyptian group linked to IS has targeted a Western hostage in this way. Yolande Nail reports.
Tomislav Salopek was a Croatian engineer, 30 years old and married with 2 small children. He was in Egypt working for a French energy company. On this road on the outskirts of Cairo, he was snatched 3 weeks ago. It's now believed he was killed by Islamic State militants. The Croatian Prime Minister says his government can't confirm the death, but they fear the worst. Previously, Egypt's branch of IS, called Sinai Province, had mainly attacked police and soldiers here in the lawless northern Sinai region. Their decision to target a foreign worker close to the capital is a worrying new tactic.
IS in Sinai are trying to emulate their older brothers in Iraq and Syria, but they're also trying to have an impact on the Egyptian economy because it's not really conducive to an investment climate when foreign nationals are being kidnapped and executed on Egyptian soil.
Cairo insists it's defeating Islamist extremists, but recent, more brazen assaults suggest otherwise. Militants have even tried to attack popular travel destinations like the Karnak temple at Luxor. Now the apparent brutal killing of a foreigner marks an ominous turn. If jihadists in Egypt continue to adopt the methods of Islamic State elsewhere in the region, it will undoubtedly put off foreigners from coming here. And that will damage business, particularly the crucial tourism industry. Yolande Nell, BBC News, Cairo.
Okay, Ms. Nell, thank you very much for that report. Very well done. Here's the next story. After having told you we'd put these seals up here, sometimes I have to watch a whole bunch of things that are happening while I play these videos for you. This next story could very much have impact and relate to how your money, wherever you are, does, because nearly every country in the world engages in trade with China. Especially does the United States. I mean, look at your big stores in the United States, your big Walmart stores. I don't know what the percentage is, but if some of you were to ask management, I'm sure they'd tell you huge numbers, over 50% of the products, other than groceries, that are sold in Walmarts come from China. And, you know, Walmart has knocked out a lot of other small mom and pop businesses because people like to go to the big stores where you can, it's almost like a mall under one roof. You go to Walmart, big store, and many of your products come from China. UK does a lot of trade with China. So does Russia, and so do other European countries. And at one point, China was applying for reserve status for its national currency because so many other nations hold so much of it. And it, you know, right now the United States dollar holds the luxury of being the primary reserve currency around the world and also acts as the standard of value for the world. If the United States Yankee dollar could lose that position to China, and some very volatile things are going on in China right now with its yuan. China's central bank has devalued its national currency for the second day in a row, sparking turmoil in global financial markets. The move, which could make some Chinese exports cheaper, will make life tougher for businesses, this news lead says, in Britain. Well, the BBC wrote this, so they're focusing on their country, Britain, but it could also have some impact, friends, on the United States as well. All right, my earphone is feedbacking. I got to punch that down. I'll take care of that while we watch this video. The BBC's economics editor, Robert Peston, explains what's going on.
All of these shoes are made in China and sold here on the streets of Mumbai at very low prices. And now, perhaps they might become even cheaper. India imports heavily from China, especially companies that make electrical and electronic goods. And for them, they'll be happy because their input costs will come down. But for Indian chemical and textile firms, well, they compete with China to sell their products to the world. And for them, things might get a little bit tougher because the price of Chinese exports will now come down in comparison to Indian exports.
For upmarket brands like Chanel or Louis Vuitton, China is a really important market because it's where the growth is. Take British clothing retailer Burberry, for example. They now do 14% of their trade in China. So for companies like these, a fall in the value of the yuan is really bad news because it makes their products more expensive and erodes their profits. And even for their outlets in cities like London here or Paris, it's bad news as well because a lower yuan means fewer Chinese tourists with less money to spend.
It's not just upmarket fashion brands feeling the pain of China's surprise yuan move. Just ask traders here on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange who've watched stocks fall for a second straight day. Now, one of the companies feeling the most pain is Apple, and that's because outside of America, its biggest market is China. So a stronger dollar makes one of these, the iPhone, even costlier for Chinese consumers. And it doesn't even see the upside when it comes to its suppliers because it pays those Chinese companies it works with in US dollars.
I'm here at Bidvest in Sandton, South Africa. It's one of the few places where you can actually buy the yuan with ease. But with China now the #1 trading partner for many African states, that situation may change. Nigeria, for instance, has pledged to store nearly 10% of its foreign reserves in yuan. Kenya is talking about establishing a yuan clearinghouse for traders, and in Zimbabwe, the use of the yuan alongside other international currencies is legal tender to buy ordinary things such as bread and milk. So for some of these countries, the devaluation of the Chinese currency could put pressure on their own domestic currency.
Here in Brazil, the devaluation of the yuan has hardly been felt. That's because Brazil is in a crisis and its own currency has dropped a lot in value. That's easy to spot when comparing the prices of Chinese and Brazilian toys, for example. Since January, this doll made in China has become 3% cheaper in dollar terms. But this one, made in Brazil, is 23% less expensive just because of currency fluctuations. If this were a real currency war, Brazil would be winning the race to the bottom value right now.
Singapore is a major foreign exchange trading hub, and many here are concerned about the ongoing impact on Asia's currencies as a result of the depreciation in the Chinese yuan. We've seen knock-on effects in the Indonesian rupiah and the Malaysian ringgit, and many Asian central banks have even had to step in to shore up the prices of their currencies. Everyone is wondering how low will the Chinese yuan go and how much depreciation will be expected in the days to come.
Anchor for the last report is Bob Preston, but we got a last-minute update. Just
fancy cushions made in Shanghai for fancy consumers here in the West. And this Chinese textile maker needed a bit of cushioning from rising costs. So it's relieved that Beijing has in the last 48 hours devalued the Chinese currency, the RMB, more than at any time since 1994.
For sure, if the RMB depreciates a little bit against the US dollars, it will definitely bring some help to our exportation business, because it might net off some effect coming from the increasing cost of the Chinese labor.
Now, since the crash of 2008, there's been a sharp slowdown in the Chinese economy, even though it's performed significantly better than our economy. For 30 years, it grew at an annual rate of 10%, but that's fallen sharply to 7% officially. And there are many who mistrust China's official statistics and believe expansion is in fact much slower. Also, in the last 7 years, China's become, some would say, dangerously dependent on debt-fueled investment, with the indebtedness of the economy increasing by more than 120% of national income. That's a faster rate of borrowing than happened here before we hit the skids. And with Chinese exports tumbling 8% in July, there are fears that Beijing is running out of tools to prevent the economy juddering to a painful halt.
There are some provinces in China which produce coal, steel, heavy industry equipment, the kind of things that China's investment boom over the last 10 years has been based on, where growth may have already dropped to around 2 or 3%. The country as a whole, of course, is still some distance from that, but that's no guarantee that the slowdown in growth is going to stop.
Now, the potential popping of the world's second biggest economy might not seem important to our exporters, such as this North London maker of top-of-the-range popcorn. But
China is one of our key growth markets for our popcorn. For us, it's one of our focus areas, and the slowdown over the last few months has been really noticeable, with a bit of a slowdown in the growth of our orders. The depreciation the last week has given us a bit of a cause for concern that the slowdown may continue yet longer.
China matters to the whole world. Oil and commodity prices have been falling because it's buying less. And by devaluing, China's exporting lower prices to us. So the moment when our interest and mortgage rates at last go up could be delayed again. And if this engine of growth for the whole world is permanently moving down a gear and could even crash, well, we'll all be poorer. So stock markets have been falling. Robert Peston, BBC News.
Okay, friends, so that's what happened. Those two stories got reversed. There was the one I introduced earlier with Robert Preston. The Italian Navy has released video footage, and there's no audio with this, so I'm just going to roll it and tell you as it's rolling what this is about. Bring it on forward. We'll roll this. The Italian Navy's released this video footage showing the dramatic rescue of dozens of migrants off the coast of Libya. In one clip, a man is airlifted into a rescue helicopter, as you see here, while in another, migrants are rescued from overcrowded inflatable boats. And so this is part of the ongoing migrant problem that they're having now in Europe. Migrants really wanting to get out of some places they consider to be very bad, and they risk their lives to do it, and wind up, for the moment, in sometimes some pretty sad situations in Europe, as many of the countries don't want all these migrants. And friends, that is it for our report for Wednesday night. Thanks for joining me, God willing, and the creek don't rise. We'll be back again tomorrow night, Thursday night, with the day's current news related to the Bible and prophecy here on Nightcast. Until next time, your host, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth, saying so long and good night, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.